transformative research. What are the societal impacts? Those are the broader impacts. How does this have the potential to do a good thing out of the world? And it can be that well, this is political science, y'all. You have broader impacts. I don't think I need to go there. You all know what that means. Can make that claim, I think, pretty easily. This is the one that everybody, this is it. Not having enough time. Usually, if you're writing in your native language and you're preparing the equivalent of a federal proposal, it's going to take you 120 hours to do the preparation, which is not just the writing of the description. It's the chasing down all the other pieces. It is from the nitpickiest detail of, oh gosh, not only do I need to register myself in their online system, but I have to wait for somebody, her, to actually go in and approve me before I can even begin that application online. Or, in the case of NSF, you can't even begin the proposal. Your advisor has to. So you have to wait for your advisor to start the proposal, add you, add us, and then you can get in there to begin to start building it in the online system. Anybody who's having trouble with somebody getting their advisor to start a proposal, contact us as soon as possible. Why? Because you don't want to be the people hounding your proposal, hounding your advisor and saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. We can do that with no repercussions. So definitely use us in that way.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting stat, but do you have any idea like what the average payoff is? Like the average amount of funding received for people to?
If you spend that amount of time and you get the actual, it's going to depend where you apply.
Sure, but
yeah. No.
It was, I don't know how you came up with that number, but
because
that's really useful.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, because I want you to think about it, that you're going to work on this for 3 weeks full time,
Yeah.
because that's just.
For looking for funding in general or on each application?
On something that's the equivalent of a federal application. Here's the secret, once you do
one, you can do the rest.
once you do one,
coverage
especially if you're doing like an NSF2 as the first one that you're really going to be pulling the stuff together, you will have the narrative written, you will have rationale written, you might have a timeline written, a budget, you'll have a bunch of things already done, or if you're doing a Fulbright. The page limits on something like Fulbright or Social Science Research Council grants are shorter. So you can't take a 4-page Fulbright and drop it into a 10-page NSF. The NSF is going to want you to, if it's 10 pages, they want the full 10 pages. So I always recommend that if you're looking at your prioritized list of to whom you're going to apply, and you've got 2 that the deadlines are close together, and one of them is the larger, more onerous application, start with that one.
Right.
Because then you can cover.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking for, since I haven't really looked into like the funding amount, I'm sure they range
Okay.
from
Yeah.
not much to a lot. And
NSF, I believe for political science is $12,000, including indirect costs for a 3rd year. Level 3, that's for dissertation improvement. If you're looking at what year are you in?
well, I'm level 2.
Level 2, okay. If it's a writing fellowship, it's usually between $25,000 and $35,000 for the year. And that the majority of that will be stipend. If you're looking at something like Fulbright for international research, they don't state what the limit is. They say, tell us what it's going to cost. But again, a lot of the social science folk do international research, and the costs for that are, looking at people who are working in Iceland, the cost for it, just international, just getting there isn't expensive. Living there for the 9 months they need $40,000 for that. So,
but do you have any, number one, do you have an idea of what percentage of students that apply for funding actually receive it? Hopefully most, but.
they receive some. Well, here's the thing: if you don't apply, you can't get anything.
Sure.
So,
100% don't get funded.
you 100%, yeah. If you don't apply, you 100% don't get funded. varies so wildly. And again, if you've gotten funding from an agency that does not, that funds directly to the individual, we don't know unless you tell us. That's one of the big weird quirks of CUNY. I have no idea a lot about students and what they're applying for that doesn't require my intervention. I will never know unless you tell me. So, we've tried different things, student surveys, and to kind of gather to sweep some of that information in. I think we're gonna be doing another big push this year to really see what we can find out about the individual departments with that regard. But right now we're in the transition of a new president and a new provost starting, so I'm feeling like any research on that from from our office is probably gonna be put on hold until the end of the spring semester as people settle in and we figure out exactly what they want to know too. So we can only survey students so many times before they stop responding. So,
Sorry, a question.
yeah.
Could you put us in touch with students from our department or our field who've either submitted applications or submitted and been successful? Could we use that, your office, as a resource to network with students who might be able to guide us?
Yes, we could do that, and we usually, or, we can do that, yeah. What we don't do is we do not keep a pile of applications that have been successful to share as a prototype.
Right.
We really, I feel like you shouldn't do that at all, but talking with someone who's been through the process
Yeah.
can be really helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can try and match you up. Some people were so traumatized by it, they're gonna be like, yeah, I don't wanna talk to anybody now. There are folks who have, if you're first level here, if this is your first year of graduate school, yeah, I'm trying to remember what all the if this is your first year of graduate school, definitely apply for the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. The deadline is early in the fall. And that one is much more, you're writing, the application is much more like the application to get into grad school. So you already have a personal statement written. You already have a proposed area of research written. You have that stuff. Research experience written. That's what they're gonna be asking you. So for anybody here this is their first year, check that out, Graduate Research Fellowship Program, NSF. Because political science, a lot of the social sciences, behavioral sciences, economic sciences sometimes forget that NSF funds them too, so. Yeah, so I don't have the stats that you're asking me for. And I feel like, I always want to say that's a dangerous attitude to begin the process with. It's so easy to be daunted by the stats of this going in. And I've been a reviewer for the National Science Foundation for a lot of their different, I've been a reviewer for private funding, for state funding, for Department of Education, for a bunch of federal Department of Education, for a lot of different kinds of grants. And if it's anything that's going to panel, you can have the most beautifully prepared application, and it may live and die on the person assigned to be your primary reader. So even with all of there is still an element of rolling the dice to this. I know that, like when I review for graduate research fellowship applications, I'm a historical archaeologist. I end up reading applications on physical anthropology, which is, I'm an anthropologist, but I don't know this genetic thing that they're doing with lemurs. It's probably not going to speak to me the same way somebody who's looking at a variety of other things that might speak to me more. If I'm the primary reader and there's one that I really like, and it falls, we know approximately how many are going to get funded. and if something that I love falls on that line, I am gonna do everything within my power to convince the other people on that panel to push it above the line, because I want the one that I like to be funded. And I'm bossy, and you can see, I talk over people. So I am going to, in a panel, I'm gonna fight for that one. But let's say somebody's doing it and they're like, they're all equally good,
So
Fine.
another, a related question is,
Yeah.
so this is presumably like what you would do like the first time you're setting out to apply for funding, and then, but it's not necessarily funding for more than 1 year, right? So you might have to,
can be.
okay,
It
right,
can be.
but you may have to put in a lot more time in successive years, right? Even though most of the work is
Mm,
or
mm,
you
no, I
basically
think that,
should aim for multi-year funding? And
it depends on the funder.
Yeah.
Some funders are only gonna give you 1 year, writing fellowships, internal writing fellowships, 1 year, that's it, you got one bite at the apple. National Science Foundation can be up, if it's dissertation research, it can be up to 2 years. Social Science Research Council, it cannot be less than 12 months. So, I mean, and Fulbright too, I think for their international stuff, it has to be at least 9 months out of the country, that's not gonna be a 1 year grant. American Association of University Women is another one that you should look at if you do international research, if you are a woman, if you are researching women. So take a look at that one, too. And that one also, but that one is a 1 year. Some of them are 1 year, some of them are 24 months. It varies, everything is very specific to the funder. And only you can decide whether or not it's worth it to you. For an archaeologist, for someone to say, we're only gonna give you $7,000 for 1 year, you'd have to really consider long and hard whether or not you were willing to put in the time to get that money. Because you really need $35,000 to make the project happen. If you have, that's the other thing, when you're applying to multiple sources, you have to think about how do they all fit together? What if I don't get all of them? What if I just get one? How will I have to modify my project if I only get one? How will it extend my time to degree? How is this going to, how will this be affected? How will this affect the actual research? And yeah, it's gonna delete. That again is something that I think it should be a really in-depth discussion with your advisor. Do they want you to, where do they want to see your energies put? And where do you need to have your energies put? Yeah, it's a hard one, yeah.
I have two related questions.
Sure.
One of them is, say you're looking at private funders as well as government funders.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when you're going and applying for a postdoc or a job somewhere, or just more grants, does one look better than the other? But then related
Yeah.
to that is also, I've looked at several private grants and then several public grants.
Right.
And it seems like the public grants, not always, have greater guidelines than the private, but often. Not in terms of application,
Right.
like what you need to include, but what you can actually use the money for.
Yep.
So for me, I'm conducting a lot of interviews.
Right.
So sure, I need money to get around, maybe to pay people.
Right.
But my primary motivation is not to teach, 4 classes a semester, so I don't do this until I'm 60.
Right.
So is it smarter to go private, simply because there's often less guidelines, and then is there a drawback because it doesn't look as good?
I think leaving with any significant funding looks good. If this is a funder that regularly funds research beyond the student level in your field, that it will look good regardless. If it's, the only good dissertation is a finished dissertation. If the funding is gonna allow you to do this in the most seamless way possible, I wouldn't worry too much about which one will look better at this stage. If you have a federal award that comes through the Graduate Center, getting the money is the goal, and spending it according to your budget. One of the reasons why we want to see you as early in the process as possible is to help you with the budget. Because we need to review the budget and to make sure that the budget matches what you're attempting to do. And once it actually awards, it becomes a contract between you and the federal government, between the Graduate Center and the federal government. And like I said, we've got a whole team of accountants and lawyers ready to take over the fiscal reporting and things like that need to happen. Not the writing the final research report, but the fiscal administration of that grant. But then again, you're dealing with accountants and lawyers, and they're gonna hold you to the letter of what they're gonna really try to hold you to the letter of what you said you were going to spend the money on. The problem with doing research and dealing with accountants and lawyers that have issued a contract between a federal agency and the bureaucracy that is CUNY is they forget that research changes, that this is a research proposal, and that you're going to get out and start doing it, and things will happen, and you're going to have to modify your research, and you're going to have to modify how that money gets spent. And that can sometimes be challenging in a bureaucracy, and that's one of the things that we can help you with. Well, she'll help you, I have nothing, no. She's the one you want helping you with that, because, yeah, total does not back down from any legal challenge, but she'll help you in a good way. I will try and help you get the money. She's gonna be the person who's gonna try and make sure that you can spend it the way you want to.
And that you don't lose it.
Mm.
They do take it away if you mess up, so.
Yeah, so she'll help you be compliant afterwards. The beauty, so that's one of that goes back to getting multiple awards. Some, like Fulbright, don't ask you for a finalized budget at the point of application. Because they are assuming that if you're good enough to get a Fulbright, you're getting other money too. And they are more flexible about what you can spend it on. NSF does not allow you, like you can't buy out your teaching. If you are not going into the field, NSF will not cover your rent. It's not a stipend, it's for direct costs of research. But Fulbright, they cover different things. If you're working in a way that's difficult to document the money that you've spent on gifts or payment to your interviewees, if you have a SSRC, they're way easier about what they're requiring for you to document that. You could just say, I'm buying people. You're just saying I'm giving everybody $10 and you're not getting a receipt for it, but I'm interviewing. Then they'll match it by saying, okay, $10 for 10 interviews. We want to see 10 interviews, so you can claim that. National Science Foundation and the Research Foundation, the folks who are your fiscal administrators here are going to be like, well, where's the receipt? And you're gonna be like, well, I'm working in an area where people don't wanna sign their name to things, so not happening, right? So it's that kind of stuff that you need to, we'll help you negotiate that once the money comes in.
Okay.
Okay,
And
yeah?
does buying out of coursework, does that apply to if you're full-time faculty, or do adjunct courses that you've been assigned to those, does that count towards that?
No, it won't count towards that. Usually what will happen is you're gonna try and find, funding that will pay you a stipend equal to the money that you would be adjuncting for. Where it gets tricky in working with the GC is if your health insurance is tied to a minimum number of, tied to the courses that you're required to teach. It's one of those just bureaucratic stumbling blocks that don't worry about it right now. When the money comes in, we can sort that out. But it's not going to be that your grant will pay the adjunct replacement rate. It will just be, they would pay for your time. And then you won't have, then you will just not teach that course. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. My PhD's from here, so I feel your pain. And, yeah, we had the brutal teaching from back in the day when I was, oh, yeah, no jargon, yeah, we talked. Don't cut and paste paragraphs from something that you've published already, please don't. The other thing is, if you are comparing your research to work that's been done before, be really careful about how negative you are about that other work, because sometimes they are the reviewer. For some funders, they will give, this is a really important little piece in the application that almost no one takes advantage of, and I don't know why. It's called suggested reviewers. And we always recommend that you talk to your advisor and say, hey, not just who do you want to review it, but who don't you want to review it. Because let's say there's this other group of researchers doing work that is theoretically opposed to what you do. You don't want them as a reviewer because they'll just be like, ugh, no, this is unproven, this is blah, blah, and you want to cross them off. But they will have there will be no appearance of conflict of interest. It's just that they approach the topic differently. The best thing that you can do one of the best things your advisor can do is to say, this person, that person, researchers out in the field would make good reviewers for this because they'll understand the research and they have no affiliation with, there's no conflict of interest. They haven't been my collaborator in the last 4 years. They haven't been a professor at this institution in the last few years. You've never been a student of theirs. You're not an advisee. So that someone can't look at their CV and look at your application and say, oh, that's why they approved it. But you want it to be someone who is sympathetic, maybe, I don't know. Somebody who will really understand what you're doing and be able to be a champion for you or to clarify things in the moment. Yes. Have people read it who are not in your field. And by not in your field, I mean like someone else in social sciences. Have like everybody read it. I always give my stuff to my dad to read. He never has any idea what the hell I'm talking about, but he catches the typos every time. So I always give it to him. I give it to friends who are, I work in the Caribbean, who are Caribbeanists but do prehistory stuff to make sure that my background things, when I'm talking about elements that are common to all, that they get it. I give it to cultural anthropologists to read sometimes. It's helpful. Make sure, again, just sit with your guidelines and say, did I answer this point, did I answer that point, did I answer this in your project narrative? Use your reviewers. This is probably the most important bit of advice that I can give you for writing any proposal. Each piece of it is a point of contact with your reviewer and the funding agency. And for the first round of reading through, they're looking for the reasons to eliminate it. So make sure that you are compliant with everything that they're asking you to do, so that they can't eliminate you on a technicality. The second thing is to treat every document as a new opportunity to give them confidence that you know what you're talking about and that you will be a good choice for them to support you and your research. If they're asking you for a budget, they're going to ask you for a budget justification, which means, how did you arrive at this number? And one of the things that students frequently ask me is, should I be trying to make this as cheap as possible? If they're going to fund it up to $25,000, should I make it $20,000? Will that make it more attractive? The answer is, not if it really costs $25,000 to do what you're saying you're gonna do. So you have to make sure that your budget is reasonable and that you can justify that cost. I work with a lot of students who are doing research in international research in their ancestral homelands, so they still have family connections there, which means they can go stay with great auntie so-and-so and it's not going to cost them anything. Well, in your budget justification, you have to put, I'm going to stay, I have a connection and I have my housing, I will be staying with family in your budget justification. If you say I have an offer of free housing and you don't state that it's family, it's called involuntary cost sharing and it's not allowed most of the time. That's the kind of thing that you should know if you're applying to a federal agency. And if at the last minute it's going in and we can't review your budget justification, we're not gonna catch that one. And that will erode a reviewer's confidence that you actually know what you're doing. Something as simple as saying, I have free housing versus I'm staying with family. So we want every piece of this so that your CV and your advisor's CV are in the same format and font. That you're consistent in your language, that the dates for things are consistent in the narrative, and then in all the places where a date needs to appear, say on a cover sheet for the application, where it says what's the start date and end date, and then the dates that are described in the narrative, they need to be consistent. And if they're different, because there are good reasons for them to be different, for like, example, National Science Foundation, you might have a 14-month project period, and you're requesting funding for field work that takes place over 9 months. What about the other 5 months? Or, well, I can't do math. 7 months. You have to explain what's happening there, and it could be, well, I'm not requesting the funding for that time period because seasonally I can't travel to that place for X, Y, and Z reason. You know, there's snow too deep to go through. Anyway, so there are other documents that they are frequently asked for. Sometimes there's something called facilities and other resources. Facilities and other resources is a great place to stick in more information that doesn't actually fit in your project narrative. Page limits, we come up against them all the time. In your facilities and other resources, you can write in, I will have access to the faculty at this institution, and give a brief bio of the faculty members there without having to include them as project personnel, without having to track them down, get their CVs and all their other documents like their collaborators documents or their current and pending support forms, like all this other crap you don't want to chase down someone you barely know to get. But you can put it in your facilities that you have access to that. You can put in there that you have permission to use archives or libraries or other things like that. Things that give the reviewer credence that you've, confidence that you've actually gone and spoke to the institutions, that you've approached the institutions that you're going to have to work with in order for this research to get done. So what else can we put in there? There are things like that. Narrative, budget, timeline, yeah. You want it to read as one document. If it is, say, a private funder's, actually any funder, if you are a reviewer, you're gonna pick it up and when you actually score with their rubric, you're gonna sit with your proposal and go down the checklist and score each thing. But as a reader, the first time you read them through, people take different approaches to how they do that. When I read an NSF proposal, the first thing I do is I read the abstract, then I read the budget and the budget justification. And if they don't sell me in their budget justification, I'm gonna be like, oh, okay, I gotta read the narrative now. Because that's, for me, I'm gonna look at that and know if they know, and get a really good sense if they really understand what they're attempting to do, like, that they really understand what they're proposing to do and how much it costs. And if I can't see that they really understand how much it's gonna cost, it's going to give me less confidence that their actual research is worth doing. But that's me. Okay. You can email us if you wanna come in, if you have something that you're working on or thinking about working on, and you wanna come in, you can schedule an appointment with us to come in. If you are planning to apply to anything that's federal, you will have to have, be registered in the federal systems, either research.gov, grants.gov, Workspace, a bunch of, yeah. So just let us know, we can get you set up to do that. If you have a specific thing that you want to apply for and you're looking at the guidelines and saying, what? We're pretty good at interpreting the guidelines, and sometimes they make us say like, what? So we can find out more information for you, because if you have that question, chances are we will be getting other folks with that same question. What else?
If you have anything in like January, February, March, come now.
Oh gosh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The sooner the better. It's like never too early.
Oh, that's a really good thing. The first thing that you do when you're planning to apply, even if it's 6 months from now, is schedule the submission date with us. The submission date is not the agency's deadline. If NSF is telling you it is due on January 15th, it's due to us 2 weeks before, completely done,
Ready for submission.
ready for submission. Yeah.
I think, if it's still the same, the political science dissertation improvement, blah, 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 is June 15.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds like you're saying it might be time to start reaching out to you.
Yeah.
But what's your like overall timeline? Like not for what we should be doing for us as good students, but for what you need as an overworked office to get us and our advisor actually doing this.
If they have, NSF has 2 cluster deadlines, that I refer to them as clusters for a reason, because they tend to be the other cluster word. January, so from mid to the end of January, every division has their deadline set about a couple of days apart. So that tends to be really an intense time for us. And in summer, July is usually the most intense time for us. We also have a level of intensity at the end of June because it's the end of the fiscal year. But other than that, we tend to be busy when no one's around, and a little more like holding our own when everyone else is freaking out, like midterms.
So you said it's a June 15th deadline?
I think so. Unless they've changed their
Well,
things, it's meant to be for the next
Just in
couple of
case
years.
it's still June 15th, have everything ready, submitted to us by June 1st.
Right, but if you need help with it,
Before.
we say, because you're not going to want to spend 3 weeks working on it full time, 3 months out from the deadline. So early March, just check in and say, hey, I'm planning to apply for this. What happens when you notify us is you get on her radar. So if you start getting emails from IUNE saying, hey, it's early May and you said you were going to do this, what are you doing? Do you need help?
Shipping around.
Yeah.
That's all the people
Yeah.
know, and it's
Yeah.
doing like May.
Yeah, so she's on that. You might get an email from me that is be like, are you okay? Do you need help? The thing to remember is if we have time, we do our best to help students especially as much as we can to make it as easy as possible for you to apply and as easy as possible for you to get the money once it awards. We tend to speak in very positive terms like once it awards. So if you tell me now that you're planning to apply for a June 15th deadline, and you know that we've said, okay, by June 1st or 2nd, it really needs to have everything, and we don't hear from you